Hey, welcome to Think Thursday from the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. Think Thursday is all about your beautiful, brilliant human brain. We're talking neuroscience. We're talking behavior change. We are talking about your mindset. Are you ready to get started? Let's go. Hello, and welcome to Think Thursday from the Alcohol Minimalist. I'm your host, Molly Watts. I am thrilled that you are here. Happy New Year. Here on Think Thursday, we talk about mindset and about neuroscience, about brain health. And today we're tackling a fascinating and incredibly relevant topic, chronic stress, and how it affects your brain and why it's so important to recognize it, especially if you're someone who is trying to change your relationship with alcohol or really any other habit that doesn't serve you. If you've listened to me before, or maybe if you've read my book, Breaking the Bottle Legacy, you know that I am a science nerd and I love to dive deep into how our brains work. And the things that I talk about in terms of behavior change really are rooted in something I call the behavior map result cycle, which is based on cognitive behavioral therapy. It's really all about understanding how our thoughts create our feelings, which lead to our actions, which generate the results that we have in our lives. But here's the catch: when we are chronically stressed, which is different than like an acute stress, but chronically stressed, our brain's ability to think logically, think rationally, gets hijacked. And we're going to unpack why that happens and talk about some strategies to get us out of that cycle of chronic stress. And I know you've noticed, I'm sure all of us are prone to periods of stress in our lives, right? And maybe you've noticed when you are in a period of stress, it can be a cycle. And that's something called learned stress in terms of how we are reacting to the things that are going on in our lives. And we're going to talk about that as well. First, let's talk about the amygdala. The amygdala is an almond-shaped structure which is deep down in the lower part of your brain, that more primitive, primal part of your brain, and it's responsible for processing emotions, especially fear and anxiety. When you experience stress, the amygdala is your first responder, triggering like that fight or flight response. And in short bursts, of course, this response is incredibly helpful. It prepares us to react quickly to danger. But chronic stress is like having that fire alarm, or the fire alarm when the fire alarm goes off in the building, right? And it's super loud. Gosh, at my work, the fire alarms are so loud. And it's like having that fire alarm blaring in your brain 24/7 when the amygdala is kind of stuck in chronic stress. The amygdala stays in a heightened state of alertness, and it starts to perceive threats pretty much everywhere, and even when none really exist. And this constant activation of the amygdala is what some people refer to as amygdala hijacking. What happens during an amygdala hijack? Your rational brain, that prefrontal cortex, the logical part that we talk about all the time, it gets basically overruled. You have probably experienced this for yourself. Have you ever reacted very emotionally in a situation and later regretted it? Of course you have. All of us have. That's your amygdala basically taking over. Now, let's tie that back to chronic stress. When your amygdala is on high alert, it impacts your prefrontal cortex ability to function actually properly. And that is why chronic stress can make it harder to think clearly, to solve problems, and to resist impulses, like reaching for a drink at the end of a stressful day. And here's where it gets critical for those of us that are working on changing habits like our relationship with alcohol. The behavior map result cycle explains how our thoughts lead to our feelings, which drive our actions and ultimately create our results. But when your prefrontal cortex is offline because of chronic stress, It is much harder to engage with the intentional thought work required to change behavior. Instead of being able to tap into that thought of, I don't need a drink to unwind, your brain is going to default to, I deserve this drink because today was awful. And that's really that lower part of the brain, the amygdala's, kind of area of oversight driving the bus. Dr. Aditi Nerurkar, who is a Harvard physician and stress expert, describes that kind of behavior as learned stress. Over time, the stress response becomes automatic, and even in situations that don't warrant it. Essentially, your brain rewires itself to expect stress, which makes it harder to break the cycle. So, what can we do? We've got to, because this is super, super important, understanding that chronic stress is actually a cycle, and we fulfill that, and it becomes something where we have learned this cycle. We have now really, just like we are trying to rewire in other directions, we've wired our brain to expect stress. And just like changing the thoughts that we have about alcohol, the first things we've got to do in terms of chronic stress, Dr. Nerurkar emphasizes, is awareness. Chronic stress often operates in the background, so we may not even realize that it's affecting us. And here are some things to watch for. All right. Persistent headaches or muscle tension. If you constantly have headaches, I always know when I am in a period of stress because I get headaches very easily. If you have difficulty concentrating or making decisions, if you are feeling emotionally reactive or easily overwhelmed, and if you are using alcohol, food, or other substances to cope more than you normally do, or adding on other things to behaviors that you're trying to change because you're noticing yourself overusing other things, these are signs that you're using things to try to cope and may be a signal to you that you are in a loop of chronic stress. Once you recognize chronic stress, the next step is to try to manage it more effectively. And let's talk about just a few strategies. Number one, this is important. This is kind of what I talk about all the time with regards to alcohol, is mindfulness and cognitive reframing. So mindfulness helps us tune into our thoughts and feelings without judgment. Like when you notice a stress-driven thought like, I can't handle this, we want to practice reframing it into something more constructive. And just like I talk about in Breaking the Bottle Legacy in terms of making those bridge thoughts, we're not going to go from I can't handle this to I've got everything under control over, you can't do that. That'll create cognitive dissonance. But you can say something like, noticing the feeling, I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I know I've handled tough situations before. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I notice that I remember that I've handled tough situations like this before. Just one little step towards feeling better, right? We don't go from I can't handle this to I've got everything under control in one fell swoop. We make small iterations. Number two, another thing that you can do to help manage chronic stress is some deep breathing. Deep breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system. We've actually talked about that here on, I think, Thursday before. Go back and look for it on deep breathing. And that counteracts that stress response. So again, try it. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, and exhale for 6. So 4 in, 4 hold, and 6 out. And then repeat that. Those deep breathing exercises are so important for calming down your amygdala. Number 3, another way to manage chronic stress is to make sure that you are getting appropriate physical activity. Yes, that's right. Physical activity reduces those stress hormones and it increases endorphins. It does not have to be something like, you don't have to go out running. A short walk or even just a few stretches can make a difference. So start small, meet yourself where you're at, just like everything else, but get yourself moving. Number 4, connection. Stress can really isolate us, but connecting with supportive people, whether they're friends, family, or a coach, will help you to be able to access that prefrontal cortex more easily in times of overwhelm and stress. I see this so often with my one on one coaching clients because it really does take having that conversation with someone who has a very a very strong connection with you, however, has some distance and who's able to help you manage your thoughts and really be able to help you get back to accessing that logical part of your brain. As someone who really struggled with a decades long daily drinking habit, I know how intertwined stress and drinking can become. And most people that I talk to, well, not all, but many that I talk to really drink to take that edge off. And the temporary relief that they get from that, of course, only reinforces the habit loop that we are trying to break, right? That's why that drinking habit can feel so unbreakable. Chronic stress keeps that amygdala hijacked, making it harder to step back and question whether drinking aligns with your long term goals. So, managing stress and re engaging your prefrontal cortex, that's you're not just breaking the cycle of chronic stress, which is so important for our health. You are actually claiming your power to make better and more intentional choices around alcohol, too. So, this is all how the brain works and how we are so wired, right? To to look our lower brains are certainly there to protect us. They are in survival mode and they are often seeking danger and looking for ways to help us avoid it. And being stuck in a cycle of chronic stress where the amygdala is literally taking over and running the show can lead to lots of behaviors and lots of habits that no longer serve us. I hope that you are not experiencing chronic stress. I know the holidays can be a stressful time frame, but hopefully the new year brings in a sense of optimism and an attitude of, I can do this and I'm looking forward to making changes in my life. I want to just encourage you to look at this and understand that recognizing chronic stress isn't just interesting, right? Well, while it is interesting to me, at least, how the brain works, it's also very empowering. The more that we know, the more we can take back control of our lives and we can live a life that is very calm and intentional and fulfilling. I really want to challenge you to take action this week. Choose one simple stress reducing practice to implement every day. I really would encourage you to make it deep breathing because as I've shared before on this podcast, it's a simple thing that you can do anywhere, anytime that really impacts your body's physical structures and it helps your brain. And as you are taking those deep breaths, inhaling for 4, holding for 4, and exhaling for 6, mentally scan your body for any tension and visualize it releasing with every exhale. If the mornings are tough, then try this at the end of the workday, or right before you go to bed. The goal is really to look for small, consistent actions. I just finished my 31 days in December of my gains, right? I don't know what I'm going to do for January besides dry January, which I am doing. But we want to look for a small consistency, a small consistent habit that calms your mind and strengthens your ability to manage stress. So, if you decide to take on this little action of deep breathing, I would love to hear about it. You can join us in the Alcohol Minimalist Facebook group. I'm always available at molly@mollywatts.com if you've got a question. And if you enjoyed this episode, or if you are enjoying these shorter Think Thursday episodes, learning about kind of the inner workings of the brain and how they are, your mindset, your brain, neuroscience, all of it, I would love to hear from you. You can always find more over at the website, www.mollywatts.com. There's lots of resources there, so check it out. Thank you for spending time with me today. Until next time, make sure you're taking care of your brain, managing your stress, and as always, choose peace, my friends. I will see you on Monday.